Good morning, teachers on fire. Welcome to another conversation that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. I am confident that this one will be no different as we dig into a great book study that the six of us took part in over the summer. I will say more about the book in just a moment, but first of all, if you are joining us in the live audience this morning, thank you. Please say hello, tell us where you are viewing from, and we would love to say hi in return. Well, this summer we jumped into a book study. The book was called What Great Principals Do Differently. 20 Things That Matter Most, and this was written by someone named Todd Whitaker, and that was a separate conversation that Michelle and I were fortunate to have with him as we set out on this journey. But here we are. Over the course of a couple of months, we learned together, talked together, interacted around this book as we went through it, and it was rewarding. We had some really valuable conversations and some pushing back and forth on certain issues, and I can't wait to jump in a little bit deeper. But just before we do that, let's meet the panel today. So to my guests, thank you, first of all, for joining us. Would you tell us briefly who you are? What does your context and education look like? Just give us the 10, 20-second version this morning, Michelle.
Hey, Tim. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm Michelle Papa. I'm the principal of Richard Butler Middle School in Butler, New Jersey, and it is my first year as a principal. I was previously an assistant principal for 5 years and a teacher of English for 7. So thanks for having me here.
My pleasure. And Livia.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Tim. I'm Livia Chan. It's somewhat similar to an assistant principal. Here we call it head teachers. I'm also in the classroom, so I teach grade 4 or 5. And I am a part of the Teach Better team as the digital content coordinator.
Thank you. And I see my principal, Mary, is here in the audience. Mary, great to see you this morning. That's awesome. Bobbie.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So I'm an educational leader from Massachusetts. I have been a principal for about 18 years, but this year I took on a new role at the Miller Elementary School as a student services administrator. So I'm very excited to be here to chat with all of you. And like Liv, I'm part of the Teach Better team. I am an ambassador and a mastermind mentor. So thank you for having me, Tim.
My pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Matt.
Hey everybody, Matt Dunbar, live from Blacksburg, Virginia right now, but I am the 6th grade administrator at Benjamin Franklin Middle School. We serve about 1,500 students in the middle school level. This is my 5th year in administration. Previously, I taught social studies for 5 years before that, so excited to be here and connect with you guys.
Awesome to have you, Matt. And Kyle.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Kyle Hamstra. I was a 5th grade teacher for 14 years, a STEM specialist for 5 years, and now I have the honor of serving at Westlake Middle School as an instructional facilitator. So my lens is a little unique because I am not an administrator. So this might be an interesting discussion.
Aspiring. Well, thank you so much, Kyle. And thank you again to all of you. I just want to say how special this is because I've been listening to these voices for what feels like the last year plus on an app called Voxer as we've connected in a separate thread. One hosted by Joshua Stamper. We've got to give Josh a shout out this morning. So Joshua Stamper from Texas, host of the Aspire to Lead podcast, has been hosting that conversation. So here we are connecting in real time and about to dig into some meaty issues provided to us by Todd. So what I've asked the panelists to do this morning is out of these 22 chapters, just choose one. Choose one chapter, one proposition from Todd that really resonated with you in some way, provoked your thinking, maybe gave you or inspired you in some way to change your professional practice, and then the rest of us can respond as we would like. So, Michelle, I'm going to start with you. This was your your chapter that you chose to focus on. And I actually have a nice, let's put this up on the screen here. Great principals take responsibility for their own performance and for all aspects of the school. So Michelle, talk about that statement. It's a big one. Talk about how it resonated with you.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It is a big one. And there are so many in the book. But to me, Todd has said this and others have as well. It's just the idea that the principal sets the tone. There are so many growing aspects and components of school leadership and district leadership. And certainly not all of these can be our strengths as leaders, but we need to be, I guess, good at figuring out what our strengths are, where we need growth, and identifying and empowering others that can help us along the way and be part of that team. You know, it's this positivity that we should have as the leaders, these merchants of hope that we need to be, to address these components of school leadership. There, like I said, there's so many. You know, student achievement is definitely at the top, and being those instructional leaders that our staff and students need is there. But we also have climate and culture and facilities and technology, engaging our communities and morale building. So it's understanding in an authentic way, I think, where we can best serve our school communities, identifying the people that can join us in leading those initiatives and those challenges that we may face, and having that great responsibility that we set the tone and we matter, and being authentic and true. An example Todd gives is just making sure that we identify our values and that we model those. So, for instance, I'm going to say that one of my values is that, as a staff, we don't talk negatively about our students. And then I go around school talking negatively about students. That's not something I want to do. That's not how I want to be authentic and connect with my staff and show that I'm setting the tone. So this is where this chapter resonated with me. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on what it mattered to you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. There was so much there, and I don't know if it was chapter 3, but Todd talks about like the principle is the filter, right? And as we just read there, that principle sets the tone in every respect. Anyone else on chapter 3? Any thoughts on this huge statement? Is it overwhelming? Do you accept it? Where are you at with this?
I think it is, that the key word here in this statement is responsibility. And I share this often, but, the Peter Parker principle of, with great power comes great responsibility. And being a leader in the school, whether you are the principal or assistant principal or even teachers are leaders as well, that we have this great responsibility to, like Michelle said, speak with true kindness, and the negativity just can't be there, because it makes such a huge impact in how the whole school runs. If there's certain things that we accept, then that's, as leaders, that's what they see, right? And we're being the role models for our students. So that responsibility, to me, that word is so key.
Mm-hmm. Responsibility and ownership, right, Livia? And Todd alludes a few times to those teachers who maybe are tempted to say, oh, I've got these students over here and there's nothing I can do about them. They are not behaving, they're not performing, they're not learning, whatever it is. And that teacher can potentially just wash their hands of them. And he sort of makes that comparison to principals too. We can't just say, oh, those teachers, right? We've got to take some ownership and do something about the change we want to see. Anyone else on this issue of taking responsibility for their own performance and all aspects of the school?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Bobbie. Go ahead.
Just to piggyback too on what Liv said with that, is you're modeling what you would expect. So one of the things for me as a principal is what you allow is what you then endorse. So as a principal, you have to, you really have to know those values and what you expect in your school so that you model it. And when someone is not following along with that, in a way to nip that in the bud, so to speak, just because then if you allow it, they think it's okay. And then the teachers think it's okay, or their students think it's okay. And it's the same thing, whether you're in the classroom, or in the, running the whole school and all those aspects.
Yeah. Matt?
Yeah, I think chapter 18 or somewhere around there talks about how you can't avoid things. Avoiding things is not a strategy to get things done. But what I was going to say, I was having a conversation with my secretary yesterday. She's incredible, most competent person I've ever met in my life, I think. And we were talking about the stress level of this school year and the impact that COVID brings. But I was saying I'm not necessarily stressed about COVID. I am stressed with the weight of the role and the responsibility that comes along with that, making sure that I am doing my best so that the folks around me can do their best. That is the weight of leadership, and doing a good job and making sure that I'm my best me so that I can allow others to be their best selves as well. So that's kind of what that had brought up in my mind.
Amazing. This discussion is already firing me up, and we've got to say hello to our good friend Stephanie, who is dropping in, and she's already given us a couple of responses. Thank you so much, Steph. It's great to have you here with us, and Steph was such an important part of our discussion this summer as well. Well, Livia, I'm coming to you next, and I'll see if I can find the chapter that you picked out. Here it is, Chapter 7, Great Principals Take Every Opportunity to Hire and Retain the Very Best Teachers. And I know you added a few notes to that. So, Livia, can you talk about this chapter? What jumped out about Chapter 7?
Yes, Chapter 7 is called Teach, Don't Tell. And I think that's kind of bringing back to about the being the role model and making everything really explicit. So, Todd talks about how teachers do the best that they know how. And so we, when we look at teachers and we see some of the things that could be improved, they are doing the best that they know how, just like our students, right? So what really resonated with me is, well, how do we improve what they already know? How do we build on it? Just like students, right? You work on their strengths and then build from there. And one of the things that really came out at me was the idea that, should try to get teachers into other teachers' classrooms. I've often said that the best PD is down the hallway, right? It's PD down the hall. And here it's not something in my, I've been teaching for 22 years. It's not something that I see very often. So I was part of another Voxer chat, and there's people that have these set schedules where you really invite people to go into other classrooms. And I think it's Michelle that's tried this, so maybe you could speak to this after me. But even offering prizes and whatnot, just incentives to try to get teachers to visit each other's classrooms. There's so, even for me, like that's one of the roles that I really love right now, is being able to visit classrooms, because every single time that I go into a classroom, I pick up something new. I pick up something different. And so to be able to learn from each other, we just build on each other's strengths. And I think it's not just that piece, but also then there's more conversation that can happen, because if, say, for example, Tim, I go into your classroom, I see something great. Now I have this opportunity to talk to you about it and learn even more, and also lift you up by saying, wow, that was such a great activity that you did. I really love the way that whatever it is, right? And so a way to uplift each other as well. Whereas, if I'm not visiting classrooms, or they're not visiting each other's classrooms, there isn't that same ability to uplift each other, because we're all doing great things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Livia, there's an educator here in our neck of the woods, Rose Pillay, who calls herself a good news gossip. And I love that idea for us as administrators. That's something we get to do, is we get to share the gossip, the good news about what is going on down the hall, and the great ideas and practices that our teachers are demonstrating. Well, others, what jumped out to you, and how would you respond to some of what Livia brought up there? That's bringing a few things back for me from Chapter 7.
Well, I can chime in on the peer observations, because I have mentioned that in several of our Voxer groups that Liv and I share. So yeah, it's a bit of an organized program, but it just gives time and space, because that's our biggest commodity, right? Is time. And one of the best parts about becoming an assistant principal and now principal, to me, was getting into classrooms. It's so amazing to see the awesome things that everyone's doing. But like Liv said, people don't know it because there's no time. So when we do programs such as peer observations that are really designed to give the time and relieve teachers of maybe a duty period, it's not something where we're taking any of their time that they're planning and prepping for students, but we give them that time, or maybe we cover their class so that they can go see something. The benefits are boundless, and it is the best PD down, being right down the hall.
It certainly is. Thank you, Steph, for saying something along those same lines. And Tom Williams from Surrey, great to see you here with us this morning as well. Something that I remember, and the panel can correct me if I have the wrong chapter, but on this topic of recruiting, Todd really dug into this idea of, do you remember the lengths that he would go to acquire the very best teachers, building relationships with neighboring colleges, and getting out there and just, he was extremely proactive. I remember that in terms of getting out and finding the best people. So a lot. And then he talked about the just going on at length about the interview process and how he would dig pretty deep with some of those candidates just to find out exactly what it was that he was after. So a lot of value in those chapters. Well, if we are ready to move on, Bobbie, you are up next. You highlighted chapter 18. And the big idea, let me see if I can get that message off the screen. There we go. The big idea here was that great principals take steps to improve or remove negative and ineffective staff members. Not something that makes anyone jump for joy, right, Bobbie? But how would you respond to this chapter, or what were your thoughts and takeaways from chapter 18?
So I really wanted to do the, be cool to care chapter, but yeah. I decided that, this I think was one of our deep chapters in the Voxer groups. We had a lot to say about this. So I thought I'd try to, dive into something a little bit deeper here, because I think this is something that we all struggle with. We all know, that we want to have, the best teachers in the schools that we have, and it makes me question why we don't have more rock star teachers. And, not to make this a controversial subject, but in my 26 years, I think I've only had a handful that I would put in that category. I think we're talking about those teachers, in that top 10%, are sort of those rock star teachers. So how do we improve and bring everybody else up to that? And a lot of what Todd talks about too, is that the things that we do as a principal is to support those superstar teachers. He talks right down to like at staff meetings or in service or professional development days, when other teachers are, on their devices, they're knitting, they're not paying attention, how that makes those good teachers kind of squirm at that embarrassment. And so as a principal, what is our responsibility to then support those great teachers? And so is that just our presence and being there so that the other teachers see us and, we make ourselves known? And then he also kind of dives into that about, how we don't want teachers to teach from behind the desk. And so that principals shouldn't be, I guess, principaling, but from behind their doors. And so how do we model that and get into classrooms and, work with those ineffective teachers and give feedback that makes a difference, but also giving feedback to superstar teachers, because your superstar teachers, when you go in with that checklist, they want to know that they're doing really well in all those areas. So they're holding themselves to a different kind of caliber than your other teachers. And so how do we work with that to improve and remove those negative staff? I know here in Massachusetts, with the educator evaluation system, how it is, there's a lot of steps that you go to. And what is it really like to work with the teacher to improve them and get them to kind of that superstar? So it's just such an in-depth kind of conversation. We could probably spend the entire hour just talking about that. But I thought I just wanted to highlight this chapter because it did give us so much to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I'm looking at my highlights here in my Kindle. One of the parts of this chapter that I found really interesting was some never need to repair, but always do. And some often or always need to repair and never do. So how do you turn that culture of repairing and restoring relationships around? In some ways, my mind sort of went over to family life and, those relatives where we have an offense that occurs and it can drag on for years if we don't address it squarely and sort of resolve it or restore that relationship, right? But back to this statement, though, how do we improve, or how do we lean into, how do we invest in staff members that do need to grow? Other thoughts on this?
I think what Bobbie said in response to the last chapter, actually, about what you allow is what you endorse, is something that's all important. And I just feel like everybody's watching everybody, so if people are permitted to behave a certain way and there isn't a consistency there, it really does damage the culture when it comes to what the people who are doing the right things, or this idea that I think the last time when we talked with Todd, Tim, we talked about the blanket monkey, when we are just addressing everybody about someone's negative behaviors, because it's easier to do that, right? Maybe hide behind an email sent out to everyone instead of just having that challenging conversation with someone who may be not doing what we expect. So, it is difficult. It's not easy. It's not enjoyable, but sometimes those difficult conversations have to occur so that we are supporting, uplifting, empowering, and protecting the people who are choosing to come every day with those positive attitudes and caring perspectives and just putting their all in for our kids. So again, not comfortable, but something that just comes with the position. And it's an expectation that our staff have of us. So if we're not meeting their expectations, the trust and the relationship that they have with us will erode as well. And we can't afford to let that happen.
And that goes back to sort of what Matt had jumped onto with this chapter, is that whole, the avoidance, and I think there's times that, we're all sort of that avoider. It's so much more enjoyable to go into that superstar teacher's classroom because you enjoy being there, as opposed to going into the classroom. We're just being there. That you need to do some more work to support that teacher. And so making sure that we're doing that, to make them, we either need to give them the support that they need to become that superstar teacher, or we need to coach them to a different role.
Okay, awesome stuff. Thank you, Bobbie. Matt, we're coming to your chapter next, chapter 16, and here was the key statement: great principals make it cool to care. You got the chapter that Bobbie, probably a few of us are looking at. Great principals make it cool to care. They understand that behaviors and beliefs are tied to emotion, and they understand the power of emotion to jumpstart change. So, Matt, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so energy and emotion, I think those are the two of the major things that I bring into the school building every single day. I think those are my strengths as a leader, and that's why I chose this chapter. And maybe I should have gone outside the box and chosen something that really challenged me, like chapter 18, because it is very easy to avoid, and especially if you work in a large school where there are lots of instructional staff, you have a number of students, it is easy to send that email and say, hey, let's make sure we're doing X, Y, and Z, when it probably could have been a conversation to 3 people that would have been tough. So kudos to you for choosing chapter 18 and not taking the easy way with Matt is going to roll up in the drive-thru. That's absolutely right. I need a Big Mac. But I chose this chapter because as a leader in a building, one of our roles is to bring a level of energy that make people better. And I feel personally that my top skill is making the building better. I want to have conversations with people, students and teachers, that energize them. I want to have that conversation with them and then leave them in a spot where they are smiling. So that's, again, why I chose this chapter. I think back to he obviously, Todd gives lots of great examples of things that he did personally, stories that he has heard about as an administrator. But one of the things that I reflect on a lot is we don't teach content, we teach kids. And this chapter did a really good job of kind of honing in on that point, in that when a kid leaves our classroom, they need to have the feeling that we cared personally about them. It got into, I get early on, it was talking about people, not programs, but this chapter kind of wrapped that back in. We want as a classroom teacher, as an administrator in a building, we don't want kids to think that they're a part of a machine. We want them to know that they're an individual person that we care deeply about, and their success as a person is our primary focus, not them passing a test, passing the class, getting a grade. It is, we want them to be the best that they possibly can be. And there was an awesome story in regard to that. And then this kind of ties into chapter 18 as well. But when they brought they had a students that had left his 8th grade school, gone into high school. They had created a panel for students who really didn't, I guess, flourish, and brought them back so that the teachers could hear some questions asked of them as to why they didn't maybe flourish the best that they could. And in doing so, one teacher kind of stood up and questioned everything as to, well, you didn't do X, Y, and Z. This is why you failed my class. And Todd said his most proud moment is when no one responded to what that teacher had said. And that really connected with me, because in that moment, the other adults in the room were showing that it was cool to care. They were there to hear what these students had to say, to figure out why they didn't flourish the way that they had wanted them to. And, you know, that had to leave an impact on those teachers, definitely to influence them for the remainder of the school year. I think that was probably at the beginning of the school year. But, you know, our role is so important. The role of teachers is so important. And if we come in and we are not giving it 175% of our effort, the kids can tell they're not going to respond to that. They want every bit of us, and they deserve every bit of us. And, you know, it is difficult right now with COVID to always be giving every single bit of us, because we are jumping through a million hoops. But something that I go to a lot is reflect back on your why. Why did you enter this field? What was it to make those positive connections? Was it to influence someone for the better? And, you know, the answer to that is yes. So making it cool to care is super important.
I am with Mark here, who chiming in from the UAE. He says, I can tell instantly that Matt is a supportive and lighthearted leader. Love it. So kudos to you, Matt. And thanks for joining us from the car today. Love that. Yeah.
My one of my co-administrators mentioned yesterday that we're always joking, giving each other titles. One time I gave somebody the chief investigative officer because he was always trying to investigate various situations. But she gave me the levity and comedy compliance coordinator. So if you're not bringing levity to this situation, especially right now with COVID, then every single day is going to be very difficult. So yeah.
I wanted to touch on, I don't know if this was the chapter, and by the way, I wrote chapter 16. It was the 16th item on his list of 20, but it was chapter 17. So Todd, you're messing us up here a little bit, but that's my bad. So chapter 17 is the one that Matt focused on. Now, panel, help me remember here. Todd made an interesting distinction between, he talked about that hype machine leader. I don't know if you consider yourself a hype machine or if you can get there. I mean, to some extent, I try. You know, I live in a middle school world, so I feel like I can bring the hype on occasions. But Todd made an important distinction between climate and culture. And I actually think of climate as more of a long-term set of circumstances. But he said, and again, I might be getting these terms wrong, so correct me, but I believe he said, you know, you can affect climate in the short term by bringing the hype, but that doesn't make that long-term impact on culture. Does anyone remember the passage that I'm talking about there? Yeah, so Matt, maybe a question I'll return back to you is how do you just, like, some days we have to bring that hype and be Mr. Fun Guy or Fun Girl. But, you know, how do we sustain the sort of energy that you're describing over the long term without being fake?
Yeah, so I think the two pieces that go there, I do have that run through the wall energy, but I also am very forward with communication. And I also am someone who plans for A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So, you know, if the staff feel cared for and supported, and that they can see that you are putting in not just your energy, but a work ethic, I think that is how you both improve climate and culture. It's not a one-off. It's not this guy's just busting his tail from 8 to 3:30. It is, hey, he's putting in hours on the weekend. He's putting in hours in the afternoon. He is thinking through things to make our lives easier, or at least hoping to make their life easier. And I think that's the distinction, because there probably are administrators out there who do grind from 8 to 3:30, and then it shuts off. But that's not the task at hand. The task at hand is being prepared, being proactive with communication, having a vision outside of fun. And for me, I do think I have that. I do have a vision outside of fun, but I do want the student to leave that day knowing that they were cared for and having a good time that connects them to the school better. And if they're connected to the school, they perform better. I think it's about having that vision, being communicative, and trying to think a couple steps ahead to better serve the teachers.
Just a really quick anecdote on energy. So my middle school team decided to put together a sort of a welcome gauntlet with pom-poms and the works and some dance music on the opening day. And our students didn't know what to make of it. Their response was really funny. They sort of stood back for quite a while, and they were pretty reluctant to go through the gauntlet of welcome. But we had a lot of laughs, and it was a lot of fun. Any other comments on this chapter about making it cool to care? Yeah, Livia.
When I hear what Matt said, I see it like two things. One is the everyday, right? How do you bring that energy every day? And his chapter 5 is treat everyone with respect every day, all the time. And another thing that I always share is like in every single interaction, you want to make that like every single interaction that you have, it is an opportunity to uplift others, right? And I think about George Couros and what he kind of brings up often too is that any space that you enter, are you leaving that space, whether it's an interaction or physical space or meeting or anything that you have, are you leaving it better than when you entered, right? And so to me, it's always that word that comes up to me in my mind all the time is uplift. So how are you uplifting? And it doesn't have to be, Energizer Bunny, the kind of energy, but even the smallest little gesture, smile, word, hug, anything that you do that uplifts other people is helping that climate and culture, right? So think of it short term and long term, right? That you always kind of have to have that, if you golf, if you have that, flagpole of where you want to be by the end of the year is, I always want to work on this kind of feeling that whatever it is you're giving of your heart, right? That, inside, and kids they can see if it's kind of fake, right? But if you know that, like what Matt was saying, your why and why you're doing this every single day, however you need to remind yourself, that is your heart that you are giving to yourself, because, we know how good it feels when we are serving our why. And also we know how big of an impact we can have when we are thinking about other people in that way.
Mm-hmm. Livia, I just finished chapter 2 of Because of a Teacher this morning, and wow, the story of Mrs. Hammond sort of blew me away. So that's a book that Livia was a part of and organized and led by George Couros, but a phenomenal book. And Tom right here is one of the people who recommended it to me. A comment that he's making, I think he might be responding to some comments from Matt just about modeling that work ethic, which is so important. But on the other hand, Tom is bringing up this point about modeling the balance, not that it's going to be 50-50 ever, but that healthy flow that says maybe we're not firing out emails the entire weekend. And I know that the Gmail email schedule function has become an important part of my practice. Stephanie says, at my own children's school, the admins know all the children and families by name on day 1. Wow. We don't have to say our name in the car pickup line. They just know. That is huge. And I can only imagine they are doing some scouting and memorizing. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a lot of advanced preparation. Well, I know as principals, that is a challenge, learning all the hundreds of names in the building. So more power to you, principals, as you start out with your teams this year. Kyle, we are starting to wind down. Here was your chapter. And again, I'm starting to doubt my chapter numbers here. This is the second thing, at least. I know that Todd said matters most. And that is great principals have clarity about who they are, what they do, and how others perceive them. So, Kyle, what jumped out to you from this chapter?
Yeah, so I may be on a different chapter as well. I was going more for it's people, not programs. And apologize for earlier if I'm sweating. We actually opened the windows and turned off the air, but then I guess this is Teachers on Fire, right? So
Yeah, there we go.
I'm a little, a little hoarse having so many conversations with staff members. As I said earlier, I'm not an administrator yet per se. So I do want to take a moment to lift up administrators and school leaders, especially now. These times are hard, and having some access to see some of the things that principals, administrators go through in a day and experience, it's mind-blowing. So thank you to all of the school leaders out there and administrators and principals. Thank you for your hard work. So in my role as an instructional facilitator, I have the honor to go into several classrooms and now to see through the lens of how can we support teachers to work and collaborate together so that we as a staff can better support and serve kids. And so it's a different dynamic. And so to bring back, it's people, not programs. You know, the famous quote, I must have seen it on Twitter and social media 1,000 times. And here it is in this chapter that I was really spoke to me because it talks about especially the lens through the student. So if students see that they have a great teacher, they'll think that they're at a great school. Yet if they don't think necessarily that they have a great teacher or they're not having a good personalized learning experience, then that becomes eventually the perception of the whole school. I thought that was a very interesting point. Todd also said, you know, there are two ways to improve a school significantly. You either get better teachers or improve the teachers that you already have. Very interesting and tough to retain teachers sometimes highly certified or to hire teachers given all the things happening in the world and in education lately. So this spoke to me in a different way in education. I've been wondering this for a while. We focus so much about building relationships with kids, which is necessary and important to have a wonderful learning experience. Yet I'm wondering sometimes in education if we don't focus enough on also building relationships with adults. You know, do we assume adults already have relationship building skills with each other and that we have intentionally grown our interpersonal skills? Some of the PD, you know, is about programs, right? It's about the next tool, the latest and greatest thing. What if professional learning or PD was more about learning who we are as adults so that we can see how our strengths and our piece fits to the puzzle? Because I believe that also impacts culture, how well the adults can collaborate over time, and that also impacts student learning in an incredible way. Matt said pretty much everything. He stole a lot of what I wanted to say.
No, that's great.
So to speak, he did mention we don't teach content, we teach kids. Also, that's honing in on the human dynamic. In general, an observation, it's extremely hard to manage students or a class if you don't have good relationships with kids.
Right.
Again, it's people. And I think the same can be said for a staff. It can be hard to grow together, to hone our skills, and to collaborate effectively if we don't have good relationships with adults first. Matt also mentioned I will run through walls, you know, with that kind of energy, but I also thought of that in a different way. You know, would you run through walls for teachers? Thinking about that at the adult level and not necessarily just or in addition to the student level as well. So I've been thinking about that for a long time. You know, I don't know if it's Strengths Finders 2.0 or something like that, but not just to identify strengths and to find out who we are as people and adults, but to understand how the pieces fit together, how you can apply your strengths, how you can find your niche to best serve. So those were a few takeaways.
There's a lot there, Matt. Thank you so much. That is very rich. Tom is asking the question, does School Pro-D provide space and opportunity for staff relationship building? I think that's a tough one for administrators because as soon as you go into the world of icebreakers or, these fun sorts of games and activities, you worry, right, that teachers are going to start complaining about my time, you're taking away my personal time or whatever. Or maybe that's just my sort of anxiety. But I can say from firsthand experience, the week before school started, the retreat that my middle school team enjoyed in the forest of North Vancouver, amazing, just to get away from the school building and, as you said, Kyle, build those relationships. Any other quick comments on what Kyle was saying there about people, not programs? I know that's a huge chapter.
Well, I think that goes back to when you and Michelle met with, Todd Whitaker before we started the book study. He really talked a lot about this. And, I think now in the new district that I'm in, they're adopting yet. How many people in the last 5 years have adopted a new reading program, a new math program, but unfortunately I see that we get the same results because it's about our program. And just like Kyle said, how are we growing our people and improving our people's skills? Instead, we're spending too much time over and over having them learn different programs, but the results are the same, and I think the big thing that Todd talks about is, I think even in the book, doesn't he talk about the teacher that goes and teaches in the gymnasium because they had a teacher that, needed a space. And so the teacher was doing amazing things. So people think, oh, it must be the gymnasium that's why they're teaching so well, but it's just because your great teacher volunteered to be there. Or his example, Michelle, when he talked to you, was flexible seating. It's not the flexible seating that makes the teacher great. It's that you already had a great teacher, so she knows how to use the flexible seating to make it maximize the instruction. Whereas if you gave flexible seating to the ineffective teacher, the instruction is still going to be ineffective no matter what the students are sitting on. So I think we have to develop the teacher's skills so that we have teachers with excellent skills, and then they can apply those skills to any of the programs that we're going to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And in any classroom, he talked about those master teachers are going to be master teachers wherever you put them, generally speaking. Well, we are starting, our time is slipping away, so I'll just touch briefly on the chapter that jumped out to me. And again, my number system, I apologize to my panel because I was numbering these based on the list of 20 things that matter most, but I'm realizing they do not line up very well with the chapters. So here we go. It's point 15. Great principals understand high achievers are sensitive to their best teachers' needs and make the most of this valuable resource. There was a lot of things here that really got me thinking. I'll start with the positive, and that is that as a new administrator, just to realize you've got this tremendous resource of master teachers around you, quality superstar teachers who have a lot of insight and a lot of wisdom. And if you are trying to launch something that they strongly disagree with, you'd better check yourself because there's probably some good reasons for their opposition. And so he really encourages leaning into them, investing in them, supporting them, and not at the expense of those teachers that do need that added support, but really recognizing that this is a resource that you do not want to neglect. And in fact, if you can leverage their expertise and their strengths effectively, you're going to be that much more successful. So that was a lot of positive for me to think about. On the provoking side, I just wrestled a little bit with some of the binaries that Todd used in terms of best, and I don't think he ever said worst teachers, did he? But the best and the struggling teachers, or the effective and ineffective teachers. Wow, I mean, I look at my own team and I think we're all effective. I look at, and I know larger school, I'm not naive, and I realize that there are some schools that are stuck with teachers who make no secret of the fact that they don't want to be there. They don't want to attend professional learning. Maybe those are some of the teachers that Todd has in mind in terms of the less effective. But anyway, going back to the central point, I just wanted to drop that out there, that as administrators, especially if you are in the early stages, but really wherever you are in your career path, you've got this tremendous resource, and that is these master teachers that are well-read, they're hungry, they're keen, and they've got tremendous insights. And so as a new administrator, for me, that was tremendously encouraging. And I'm glad that at my school, we do have some structures set up to regularly take the pulse of some of the leaders on our team. Other thoughts on that point?
Yeah, Tim, I think it's important to recognize that everybody can lead something. And so I understand we wrestled with this in our Voxer group, these binaries you mentioned. And so everyone has worth, everyone has value, and everyone is worth putting our time, effort, and support into. So we just need to empower people to find what it is that they lead. And that's our students too. So that's something, if we hold that as a core value, will permeate our schools.
Yeah, and to follow up with that, I think of 3 words. It's all means all. And that means all students and all staff, everybody that's in our reachable circle. You know, it's not just our teacher colleagues, but it's our, we call them educational assistants here. It's our custodians, it's our families, it's our, you know, anything that we can reach with our hearts, that all means all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's very well said. I also wrestled with that binary of best. And I want to say, I just love the opportunity in our Voxer chat to be able to wrestle with something and have that vulnerability, that space. So seeing again from the relational side, thank you for that. I think it depends on how you define best, you know, and how do you measure what is best. Definitely want to accentuate the strengths, but maybe best is measured by making a difference in the lives of kids and each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much to the panel. I know there is so much more that we could dig into, but this just sort of scratches the surface. There we go. And if any of this discussion is interesting to you, we would encourage you. I think we would all recommend the book, right? We would all say it's well worth the read if you are an administrator or aspiring leader. Something to dig into and give some thought. Well, as we start to sign off, we did have to say goodbye to Matt, who sends his regrets and his goodbyes. He's joining his family for a big family football event today, which sounds like a lot of fun. But as we start to sign off here, would you let us know how we can connect with you, whether it's Twitter or other social media platforms, for those interested in your thoughts today? And if they would like to connect, where can they do that? Kyle, and by the way, as I go around, if there's someone that you would like to shout out today, that's normally a question that I like to ask. We're short on time, but you can throw that in there as well. So Kyle, how can we connect with you?
Hey, Tim, thank you very much. I'm on Twitter every day. My Twitter handle is my name. I'm also interested in connecting on Instagram and Facebook. I would like to give a shout out to my Westlake Middle School principal, Anne-Marie Atkins, John Corey, and Joanna Rogers. Thank you for your strength and leadership.
Michelle.
Thanks, Tim. And thank you so much for setting up the Voxer group and hosting and partnering with me on that. It was super fun. And I mentioned it was such an anchor for me all summer to come back to. And it was an awesome experience. So I'm best found on Twitter at mpapa.edu. Want to shout out a couple people. My amazing, inspiring superintendent, Dr. Daniel Johnson, who is so supportive. And then my incomparable husband, who is also in his first year as a principal, who tried his best to participate when he could, Danny Papa. Yeah. So thank you to all of you. And it was quite an honor to be with you during this time.
I just have to say a couple quick things here. Michelle's being modest. This idea for the book study was hers, so thank you, Michelle, for initiating. And she really carried the weight, I feel like, on leading the charge on this thing. So thank you again for that. And I didn't realize, Michelle, so Danny's a rookie. You're a first-year principal as well, correct? So are you both? You're the rookie principal tag team?
We're nuts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Two children under 4.
Wow. All right. Well, that is exciting. Write the book in 5 years. That'll be a fun read. Bobbie, over to you. How can we connect?
Oh, so you can find me on all the socials at Bobbie French. It's pretty easy. You can also check out my webpage. And on Facebook, I run a private group and page for educators to connect called Lead, Learn, Hope. So always happy to connect with people. And I just want to shout out my Teach Better Mastermind group, especially like I've got Michelle and Liv here, and Sari and Jessica and Rob, because they've been just such a great support to me in the last year as I have been just, growing more as an educational leader and then transitioning roles this year. So just such a great group.
And Bobbie, are you still producing episodes on the podcast as well?
So we're getting ready so I have the Busy Principals podcast. And so I'm getting ready for a new season, and we're going to be doing a little transitioning with that. So I'm excited. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for asking, Tim.
Yeah, well, I'm a big podcast fan, so tune in to Bobbie's podcast. And Livia?
I'm most active on Twitter, so you can see my Twitter handle here at Livia Chan L. And I'm going to use my one ticket shout out for you, Tim. I know you often do this, but rarely do I hear that people are shouting you out. So I live in the same area as Tim, and so I had the greatest pleasure to meet Tim a couple times this summer in person, and that was just such a memorable time. And just following your work and really diving in deeper and being part of Voxer groups with you and over the summer. And so my shout out is to you. So thank you for all the work that you do, and I just really appreciate you and your friendship.
Livia, the appreciation is mutual. You are so kind and supportive. So thank you so much for all that you do for me and for so many others. You are a tremendous supporter and encourager. I think that is definitely a gift of yours. Well, thank you to all of you again for joining me today. I know this conversation is going to continue on Voxer, Twitter, and wherever else we find a few moments, right, to share some insights. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and have a wonderful year as you apply some of what we talked about and read about here today. So take care, everyone. Thank you again, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.